Orioles headed to Seattle this weekend to take on the Mariners, who at various points this year were surging. Certainly not in the surge right now. Maybe a decent time to be going out there. Larry Stone has seen all the good, the bad, the ugly, and some beautiful uniforms out there in Seattle over these 25 years of covering the Mariners. He is a columnist there as well, and you can follow his journey at Stone Larry, which is the other way to do Larry Stone. He's at the Seattle Times, and we welcome him back onto the program for a little bit of fun. I thought that the Mariners had me sucked in May, man. I thought, they're good. They're going to be good. They're going to stay good. They haven't stayed good, Larry. What happened?
Well, you're right. They had me sucked in a little too, Nestor. But first of all, they had a few injuries, big injuries. Felix Hernandez went on the DL with a calf injury, and everything with the Mariners kind of revolves around Felix. So the pitching rotation without him became kind of ordinary. And then Wade Miley went on the DL. Taijuan Walker got hurt and missed a couple of starts. A couple of bullpen guys got hurt. Their two best defensive players, Leonis Martin and the center fielder, and Ketel Marte, the shortstop, both went on the DL at the same time, and the defense really hurt. So that, the accumulation of those injuries kind of sent them into a tailspin, and then the pitching, the lack of depth in the pitching staff, the rotation was really hurt, so the bullpen was overtaxed, and what had been an overachieving bullpen for the first 2 months really has hit a wall and has been overworked, and they're paying a big price for that. The starters aren't going deep in the game. They've had to call up a couple guys from the minors. It's just been kind of a mess. And, the hitting is much better than anyone expected. They're one of the better hitting teams in baseball, really. And but the pitching, the run prevention has let them down, and that's been the big issue.
Well, we don't have the kind of ace here. And I guess, if Tillman went down next week, God forbid, right? You can't replace that guy when he goes down. It really does. It doesn't just change the complexion of those starts every 5 days. You almost wish it were that easy, because those starts then become bullpen innings, and you're not getting the same quality of anything every fifth day when you lose your stud, right?
Yeah, and what's kind of alarming for the Mariners, I think, is that even before he got hurt with the calf injury, he just wasn't quite the same Felix. Maybe it was because of the injury, or more likely it's because he's now 30 years old and has thrown more innings over the last 10 years than anyone in baseball. And I kind of always wondered when the cumulative effect of that workload was going to hit Felix, and it may have hit him this year. You saw it with Verlander a couple of years ago, where he was the best in baseball, and then suddenly he wasn't.
Might be seeing that with David Price right now, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. There's just so much wear and tear that a human arm can take when you're throwing 95 miles an hour and throwing 250 innings a year. Felix has been amazingly durable. He doesn't miss a start, so that's why it was so shocking when he went on the disabled list. And his fastball has declined in velocity, and he still has the tremendous movement, and he's a smart guy. I think he's going to figure out and kind of have a second act to his career. But even when he comes back, which is supposed to be around the All-Star break, maybe just after the All-Star break, it's going to be fascinating to see what kind of Felix Hernandez he is and what kind of second half, and that will go a large part to determining what kind of season the Mariners end up having.
We have a soft spot here for Steve Johnson, not only because I've known him since he's 5 years old, but, he was an Oriole, then he wasn't, and he wanted to be, and his dad's on the broadcast and all this stuff. And it felt like, when he got thrown out of here, maybe he wouldn't pitch in the big leagues again. Appointed himself nicely, at least, was a part of many, many pitchers that the Mariners have had there this year.
Yeah, he had a stint up here, and he did all right. And then, I think he just got kind of caught up in the numbers game. He may be back, who knows, because there's going to be a lot more turnover. But there was a time there when he kind of worked his way into more important innings, not just mop up, but was getting thrown into the fire a little bit.
And when the fire was hot, they were first-place team, or fighting for first place around that time, right?
Exactly, yeah.
For the rest of the year, what will straighten them out this side of, the king being the king, right? There's nothing that's going to straighten their season that doesn't involve him, right?
I think that's a big thing. And they're, first-year general manager Jerry DiPoto, we're a month away now, virtually from the trade deadline, and this is a team that, I think you sort of have to realistically give up on their chances of winning the division. They're 11.5 games behind Texas. 3 weeks ago, they were tied. Now, in the span of 3 weeks, Texas picked up 11.5 games, and I don't think it's going to go back the other way. So, you're talking wild card. You're 2.5 games out, but there's a lot of teams that are going for those wild cards. So, I guess my point was that they're going to Jerry. It's going to be interesting to see. He's going to have to bolster the pitching staff. And certainly get another bullpen arm and maybe another starter, because the rotation, just as it is constituted now, it needs some help, and it's not there in the minors. And they also need an outfield bat. So, to me, to answer your question about what it's going to take, I think they're going to have some reinforcements brought in, and so how that plays out in the next month will tell another big part of that story.
Larry Stone joining us here from Seattle. We're talking all things Mariners. The Orioles with 4 games this weekend against the Mariners out in beautiful Safeco. And you talk about the trading deadline, and I mean, you and I are old enough to remember when 500 was a white flag season, right? I don't know that any team that's 500 at the trading deadline isn't trying to get more all in than less all in, especially if they can hit the ball and they feel like that there's some vulnerability in the wild card to play their way in. And I think in places where it's been a little while since they've made the playoffs or they've struggled to make the playoffs, there's almost a good faith gesture in the last week of July. If you're at 500, you're going to take some sort of run at being a wild card, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. That's become the new standard, and that's why it's even harder to make deals than it used to, because you come up to July 31st, there might be 10 out of 14 or 11 out of 15 teams in the league that think they're in it. So you're talking about 4 or 5 teams that are the sellers for, and they have to provide the players for everybody. Minnesota's, the San Diego's, the Philadelphia's, the Atlanta's, and Milwaukee, and everyone else is, and the Reds, I guess. Everyone else is convinced that they're just a hot streak away from being in there. So it's certainly, on June 28th, there's not many teams that are ready to throw in the towel. Maybe it'll clear itself more, and it usually does as it gets closer. But there's definitely fewer sellers than there used to be, and more teams that think that they could make a run.
I guess we're a year and a half now out on the Nelson Cruz experiment out there, and the money that was spent. That was good money spent by the Mariners, right? I mean, not all of the free agent acquisitions, and Cano may be, example number one for the money they spent. They don't work out always, and the Orioles are finding that out with Jimenez and with Gallardo and trying to buy arms. There was a bat that fell into their lap, and the same thing's kind of happening with another Seattle cat, and Trumbo this year, who is just kind of all world when he put on the orange cap with the cartoon bird.
Yeah, no, they hit a home run with, no pun intended, with Nelson Cruz. They're ecstatic about him. He's on his way to another 35, 40 homer, 100 RBI, close to 300 season. A great guy in the clubhouse, community, and all that. So no complaints there. Believe me, I've heard from a lot of Mariner fans ripping the GM for, it was one of his first trades, Dipoto. He traded Mark Trumbo when he was the GM of the Angels to Arizona, and he got to Seattle, and he traded him again. And but he didn't fit into the kind of team that they were trying to build here with high on-base percentage and the like. But I think if the guy's going to do what he's doing, I think they could have put up with some of his so-called flaws. So you have to say that was a mistake by the new regime.
Well, you saw plenty of him, in Anaheim through those years when you were on the beat, and he had monster years, but they looked to be come and gone, right? And I don't think anybody could have predicted this, and certainly not even the Orioles, who really signed him as a Band-Aid. I mean, he was going to be the replacement for Chris Davis if they couldn't get Chris Davis done, and I don't think they ever really believed they were going to get Chris Davis done. I don't think Chris Davis believed he was coming back to Baltimore for $161 million. I think he thought he was going to Seattle or some other place for $200 million.
No, I don't think anyone could have predicted this. He did. I mean, he when he came over to Seattle last year at mid-season, maybe might have been right around this time. I can't remember. He had a horrible first 3 weeks, which kind of turned everyone against him. But then Edgar Martinez took over as hitting coach and kind of worked with Trumbo and turned him around. And as a matter of fact, Trumbo, I've seen interviews he's done this year where he said he's still using the techniques that he learned from Edgar.
How could Edgar Martinez teach you a bad technique, Larry?
No,
Seriously, right?
He's the best, the best right-handed hitter I think I've seen in the last 20 years, or at least up in the top 5.
And had a far better disposition than Manny Ramirez as well.
Yeah, he's a prince. He's a prince of a guy, and beloved here. And the work he's done with you get a lot of superstar type players. He's a borderline Hall of Famer. They don't want to roll up their sleeves and do the work a lot of cases because they don't have to. But he's been a tremendous hitting coach. You look at the Mariners' numbers since he took over, and they've been one or two best hitting teams in the American League under Edgar Martinez. And so Trumbo did finish strong last year, but as I said, they're envisioning a team with good defense and athletic and that can run and high on base percentage, low strikeouts, and they just didn't see Trumbo as that kind of guy. But it's not like Adam Lind, the guy who ended up being the first baseman, is lighting the world on fire or is very athletic himself. So like as I said, I think that's a misstep by DePoto and company.
Edgar Martinez not in the Hall of Fame. Larry, you got to tell those hippies that DH is a position. Like they let him play that so he could hit the ball, and that's what he did. That's an argument for another day. I want to go back to Nelson Cruz. One of the things that when he came to the Orioles, obviously he was in the damaged goods aisle, right? I mean, from the PEDs and where all that stood. I don't know that anybody really knew what a good dude he was. And, our experience here, and I think even Buck's experience, was he was a really right guy. It's really still disappointing that the Orioles would spend bad money on bad pitching instead of keeping a guy they had around here who really was a good guy and a guy the Latin kids loved. And you know what I mean? The Scopes and the Machados of the world loved having him around because he is such a good clubhouse guy. And I don't know that he had that reputation earlier in his career at Texas or whatnot. He certainly left Baltimore with it.
Yeah, the PED thing, that hit his reputation for sure. But, as you get to know him, you see what a good guy is. And he's really, he's really tight with Cano. So it's led to, for both of those guys to be really happy. The one has the other, and Felix, and there's a big, strong Latin contingent in this clubhouse, and they all seem to really like it here, and I think that comfort level has helped Cruz in Seattle. Not that it wasn't there in Baltimore, because he did well in Baltimore as well, but it's interesting if this season falls apart, and the Mariners are kind of on the brink. If they go in a stretch now where they lose 10 out of 15 or 12 out of 17 or something, and they end up being hopelessly out of it, there's a chance that he would be a pretty good trade chip for them if they suddenly unexpectedly turn into sellers. There's been some speculation that he could be a guy they use because they don't have much of a farm system to maybe restock their system with some prospects. So that's something to watch as well.
Well, that's the issue for the Orioles. I mean, they're out in front right now and really need more pitching and just don't have prospects. I mean, it's a real indictment of the organization when, you get to the point where, you're on the clock in late July and maybe there's a pitcher out there, maybe you have money to spend, which the Orioles do. In a year when you have a chance to go for it, going for it is, I think, kind of paramount. And you don't think the Mariners will be in a position, right? I mean, you're down on the Mariners right now. You believe they're trending in the direction they're going to trend in.
Well, I think I think they'll reach the trade deadline close enough to not tear the team apart. But it's looking unrealistic to me that they're going to be a playoff team, and they have the longest playoff drought in baseball. They haven't been since 2001. So this is 15 seasons. So people are getting very frustrated here. So you mentioned before sort of an obligation to go for it, and that's what I think they feel here. So if they're within 5 games or 7 games of the wild card, they'll keep their team intact. But it's this stretch they're on now. They've lost something like 17 out of 25, or they were 10 games over 500. Now they're at 500. So in the span of about 3.5 weeks, they're 10 games under 500. So it doesn't take a genius to see they're trending in the wrong direction. So it's just getting more of a long shot that this is going to be the year when you've got Texas 11.5 games ahead, so you're going for a wild card realistically. So,
and here comes Houston,
I guess I've lost my optimism.
Yeah, and here comes Houston, but I don't think anybody saw Texas coming like this, that they were in a position to run away. And, hey, the Orioles are in a position to run away all of a sudden, too. A lot of these division races have sort of stretched out here as we get toward July.
Well, you look at Texas, no one really believed in them, and yet they won the division last year. People almost forget that. It wasn't Houston. Houston took them down to the last day, but they made a wild card berth. But Texas won the division, and what we were just talking about farm systems. You said Baltimore doesn't have many prospects. The Mariners don't either. There's no team in baseball that's been better at that over the last 4 or 5 years than Texas. They keep churning out amazing guys out of their system kind of quietly, and also building the depth where they could trade for a Cole Hamels last year that really led them into the postseason. They've sort of under the radar. They've got a great organization there at major and minor leagues, the kind of one that I think a lot of teams badly want to emulate.
Larry Stone covers all things sports, baseball, and is a columnist at the Seattle Times. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Stone Larry. Hey, going to the Hall of Fame, Griffey. This is a big year for Mariners fans with the old Bruce Bochy sweaters and the old green things that they used to wear on Sundays. And Griffey would hit those home runs where Brad Pennington's neck would jerk around. But this is a big thing with Griffey, and I know his dad was involved a little bit with the Pete Rose thing last weekend in Cincinnati. Griffey family having a little summer celebration, right?
Yeah. This is going to be tremendous for them. I think there's going to be a huge contingent of people from Seattle that are going to trek to Cooperstown July 24th for the induction. He got all but three votes, the highest total in history. Still trying to figure out who the folks who didn't vote for him were. But it's in this age of steroids and tainted accomplishments. He's a guy that's I'd never say that definitively that a guy was clean, but I feel pretty strong that he did it cleanly, and I think that's enhanced his legacy because he's a guy that made it through the 90s and the 2000s with his reputation intact, and there's not many guys that you could say that about. There was just no whispers or innuendo, so I think that just adds to his stature as he heads to Cooperstown.
He was always cool with me, man. I mean, he was the biggest star in the game, but I never really saw him big league people. I think he had a grounded nature, even at a time when it was hard for him to be grounded because he was the biggest star in the game.
Yeah, he was the biggest star in sports for a while there. Nike, he was Nike's golden boy, and in Seattle of all places, but he was just sort of transcendent. He could be difficult to deal with. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. There's a lot of people who in the media who kind of roll their eyes at him because sometimes he would give you the runaround. But I always found him to be quite. I think at his core he's a good guy. I just think he was really uncomfortable in the spotlight. Basically, a shy guy who didn't want all that attention, and kind of bristled at it sometimes. But not in a I covered Bonds and I covered the Giants when Bonds was there. So I back to back I got to cover Bonds and Griffey, and
I'll take Griffey all day.
100% better. Griffey was 100% better to cover than Bonds was.
No doubt about it. Larry Stone here, longtime baseball. Hey, did you make it to the U.S. soccer game out there a couple weeks ago? I know it's such a soccer community out there, and, that's a nice little perk of seeing a U.S. team play a meaningful game out there.
Yeah, I made it to one of the games. I think it was Ecuador where they won, and it was a great atmosphere. 50,000 people. This is a real soccer town, and they kind of faded in the semis. But
I would love to have that in Baltimore. One extra thing. I guess for Seattle, you lose the Sonics and never really had hockey. And I know the Huskies are big there. But, I mean, this is something grown from nothing. There's not a lot of that's going on around the country at that success and at that level.
Right. Yeah. No. We consider it a major sport here. I mean, they're drawing regularly 40 or 50,000 people. Although they're having a down year. The Sounders are having a down year this year. But this is a soccer hotbed here, and I think more international events will be coming here. I don't see why the U.S. couldn't get a World Cup again. And if the U.S. got the World Cup again, I don't see. I'd be shocked if there wasn't a round played in Seattle.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, here in Baltimore, we would love to have that kind of mojo. We've had some big games here. We've had some friendlies staged here and, qualifies, different things, but nothing on that level. And to see the Copa come through and, do well in some places and not so well in other places, and to see Messi on the soil, it was a good story for a month. I think even if you didn't have to be completely plugged into soccer to appreciate Messi scoring that goal against the U.S. down in Houston, right?
Right, and Messi came to Seattle.
That's right.
For a match, and Drew. He didn't start because they had already clinched their way into the championship round, but he did play some and he did score. I lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The ticket prices were really high, and that kept attendance down. Even in Seattle, they didn't sell out as they thought they would.
Yeah, I saw Grant Wall and a bunch of the soccer writers were all tweeting about that and writing about that, and it was $350 to get in at the Meadowlands over the weekend, and they had unsold tickets.
Yeah, and I think they're going to have to. I think they may have overshot their. What fans were willing to pay, but they averaged 45,000. I was just reading for the whole tournament, and that was more than they did last year when it was in South America. So it was. I think it has to be considered overall a big success.
Hey, man, enjoy it. I'm not even going to bring in the Seahawks. We'll talk about them later, but they're still pretty good, right? I mean, as long as that kid's under center, they're a threat to win 12 or 13 games this year, right?
Yeah, they think they think they got as good a team as they've had since they won the Super Bowl 3 seasons ago. So they a lot of optimism.
It's almost a lime green season. Larry, take care of yourself. Enjoy the baseball this weekend. Great having you on as always.
All right. See ya.
You got it. Larry Stone. He is Stone Larry out on Twitter, as well as out at the Seattle Times. Longtime baseball writer, columnist, and headed to Cooperstown with Ken Griffey. So that'll be kind of a good story this summer as Griffey goes in. You can find me out on the Bio Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear. It is all brought to you by Toyota. Don't forget, the morning newspaper that we do hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It is powered up by our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Last but never least, breaking news happens first, and the Orioles are out on the West Coast all weekend. We hope there's no breaking news on the Ravens, but it comes to you first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis is sitting in the seat from 3 until 5 on Thursday, driving you home, and no doubt getting you ready for some Oriole baseball as we stay up late the next couple of nights to watch the first place Orioles do their thing out in Seattle, and then, of course, at Dodger Stadium next week for the 4th of July. I might make it down to Dundalk to see the Kicks boys. Who knows? It is WNST Rock Week coming up, and Steve Whiteman is a part of that. Beginning July 11th, I'm going through all of the vault that I have at WNST and from the Evening Sun, and putting some rock and roll on the radio for a week. So some great interviews with everyone from Billy Joel and David Bowie and Clarence Clemens and John Bon Jovi and the Black Crowes, all from the late 80s and the early 90s. I think you guys will dig it. It's the first time I've ever aired it. It's the first time I've ever listened to it. It's the first time I've ever edited it. And it's a good thing I have a sense of humor about myself, because the guy asking the questions really sucks, but the answers are awesome, so you're going to dig it. It's WNST Rock Week. That is the hashtag. You can email me anytime, nasty@WNST.net. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Anywhere you are, we are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Thanks. Keeping me up late at night. And certainly with the trading deadline coming, we're trying to wonder not just who the Orioles are going to be targeting, but who all the competitors, including the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, who may have more talent at the minor league level. This guy's covering one of those teams where it's been a bit of a lost season. We're familiar with that here in Baltimore. We had 14 in a row. He is Jeff Fletcher. He covers all things baseball at the Orange County Register, which is one of the places I wanted to cover baseball back in the 1980s when, I liked Southern California and thought the girls were pretty and the baseball weather would be better.